Bow, bow, bow.
They call me Timmy.
Timmy. This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/RubyRogues. Hey everybody, and welcome to another Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel we have Dave Kimura.
Hey everybody.
Eric Berry.
Hey there.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I'm right in the middle of Ruby Dev Summit, so if I duck out early, it's somebody else's fault. We also have a special guest, and that's David Richards.
Hey there.
Now, David, Eric and I know you just kind of from the local community, but do you want to introduce yourself for everybody else who's not from Utah or hasn't worked with you before?
Sure. I'm David Richards. I've been writing software for a couple decades. Lots of that has been Ruby. And right now I'm building some fintech stuff and basically having a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, Eric mentioned before the show we were talking about, some of the aspects of writing software and being on teams and, work situations and stuff like that. I'm not quite sure where to start. It seemed like Eric might have had an idea, or you might have had an idea of where you want to go first. But I think this is part of the, we talk a lot about the technology, which is easy because a lot of it's either, it either works or it doesn't, right? But a lot of this other stuff, it's, oh, okay, so, well, crap, people. So where should we start? Where should we dive in first and just talk about, some of this, this process of making software and sausage making and crap?
So one of the things I want to bring up before we delve too deep is I actually want to give a little bit more of an introduction to David.
Okay.
David is a fascinating individual. He is his mind is just fascinating to listen to because, so we went to lunch the other day and his mind is just going 100 miles an hour about some of the deepest, most amazing thoughts. And I'll admit I understood about 80% of what he said, but I just want to put it out there that David is one of the most remarkable minds that I know. And I'm so glad to have you on this show. So part of the reason why we invited you on is because when we were talking, you and I are in this Slack group where we, all of our friends are in there, a bunch of our friends are in there. We talk about different aspects of developer life, right? And one of the things that you brought up was a strong frustration of developer turnover. And so I kind of want to hear about that and bring up the conversation that we had on Slack and bring it more to light here. And what are your thoughts on developer turnover? How can we prevent that? How does it affect the developer atmosphere?
So first of all, I need to tell anybody that's listening, I'm blushing. Thank you for that.
It's true.
I was going to say, last time I went to lunch with David, I think I understood about 50%. So I just nodded in all the right places.
I was giving myself more credit.
It's probably that I just don't make sense. That's probably the real truth. But yeah, the question of turnover is crazy, and it's bothering me more and more as I've been working on more and more projects. It's like, how can you justify an industry that churns through people? Or if instead of like resolving a conflict at work, we just quit and go make $10,000 more at the next job. And that's just a really, I think it's a toxic environment where we're not really able to get where we want to go.
That's interesting that you bring that up because, I mean, it's been a thing for a while. I remember I got started I worked for Mozy for a year and a half, and I ran their tech support team and then worked in QA for them. I didn't even do dev, at least not officially. And then, I went to one company and then another and another and another, and I lasted about a year and a half in each of those places. And I thought, oh man, I'm weird. I've got this turnover and it's going to look bad on my resume. Nope, I wasn't weird at all.
Yeah.
Of course, now I've been out on my own for 8 years, so different thing. Yeah. But
it's crazy how normal it is.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of companies, especially more startups, I'm sure there's some good ones out there, but they're almost like startup succubus. They just kind of like suck the life and chi out of you. And I think that a lot of it's driven by, the whole concept of we work hard, we like to play hard, and try to make people fit into your kind of work style or atmosphere. And you almost overwork people. And, you say, we're going to work 12-hour days for 5 days. Then we're going to let you have 2 days off. Then you're going to come in, do it again. And then, hey, tell you what, at the end of the summer, 3 months from now, we will take you guys out to a nice dinner. It's like, so much work. And then, hey, here's, a Jelly in the Month club card. So,
well, I think can't you solve the problem just with more ping pong tables and lunches?
And arcade machines and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I go to work. It's for the ping pong.
So there was this.
So it's like we're trying to pretend that we're going to play our way out of this, right? That it's just a bunch of boys playing, and that's probably another part of it too. Is it's a guys club, but most of us want to build something and have something interesting to do, and not ping pong our way out of our job.
Oh, sure. No, I think you're right. I think a lot of it just comes down to, so let me back up for a minute. So the first job that I left, that was a coding job, I got laid off. I left Mozy. I already mentioned him, so I may as well just mention him by name. I left Mozy because effectively, they just weren't treating me well. They didn't appreciate me anymore, and so I left. And I see that happen a lot of times too, where they kind of start to take for granted that you're going to stick around. And then you've got basically, situations where then later on, you get to the point where, there's better money, or, you get laid off because, all of our Ruby clients left. And then 6 months later, they come crawling back to you going, we really need Ruby guys. And I'm just like, no. But just stuff like that, I had a couple of other jobs where, again, my boss was just really rough to work for. And they just kind of took for granted that you'd stick around because they're paying you a bunch of money. And it was, I want to make a difference, or I want to communicate, I want to grow, and you don't get the opportunities that you're really looking for your work to matter to you the way that you want it to. And so, you move on.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit a nail there, Chuck, where people want to feel like they're doing something that matters. And a lot of times, you might be developing software that helps reduce crime or identifies potential crime or whatever.
I worked for that company. I did.
Yeah, I know. But, my point is, like, people, if they don't have a sense of belonging or what they're doing matters, then they're going to move on to something else where they feel like they're making a difference, either within the company or just bettering people's lives or something like that. And I think a lot of people might keep moving on, always trying to fill this hunger for making a difference in the world because they really don't know themselves yet. They haven't really gone on this walkabout to find out who they are and what they can do to make a difference.
So is that the company's problem then, or is that the employee's problem?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's more on the employee to really, a company's not going to show you who you are. I think that's something that you should have kind of gone through in more your adolescent years in college or high school or whatever to really find oneself, and then find something that you're passionate about.
That's an interesting thought, that the sticky ability of a job is a factor of both salary and maybe benefits, but also all of those things could be worse if the cause is right or if it matches the personality properly. I think that's actually a really good case. Now, I had 2 job offers from different companies, and I chose one of them because it was more in an industry that I wanted to be in, and it sounded funner to me. But in apples and apples, it was exactly the same. But that was the only reason I went that way versus the other.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've started to explain to people sometimes when I try to explain who am I, as a software developer, I'll say I'm an emotional developer. And I think this touches on what you guys are talking about, that I have to care about the project. And maybe it's because I've been in so many of these nonsensical work cycles where I'm working all the hours and just killing myself for a project. But so that's a different problem. But still, I have to care about the problem and actually connect to it somehow for me to feel like I'm really getting creative and going the distance with it.
I have to wonder too a little bit though, because I've talked to people in my parents and grandparents' generation, and a lot of them, I mean, they just went and got a job, and it was a 9-to-5 thing that essentially paid the bills, and it wasn't really an option for them to even care about whether or not they liked or hated their job. And so I wonder if this is an industry thing or a generational thing, or because there's so much demand. I mean, I could probably wind up in a company that does more or less whatever I wanted it to, right? If I look hard enough and make the right connections in those companies. And so, is this just a position we're in because of where the software industry is, or is this a position we're in because, work has become a different thing?
And, this is kind of an intra-company problem, too, because developers are more like this than maybe somebody that's working customer support or other things. We're looking, and we kind of get a lot more benefits and a lot more freedom than almost anybody else in the company.
So do you think that it is a generational thing from, maybe too many participation trophies handed out when we were younger, or something like that, where we have forced companies to change the way they do things because of the mindset that we have today of either whether it's being entitled or expecting to be praised or expecting to be, I don't know the word, cared for, by the company, that we're expecting these things and we are in such demand that if you don't give it to us, then there's 100 other companies out there that will.
So I asked the question, but I honestly don't think so. I think it's much more that the definition of work has changed. And so the way that we look at what we go and spend our day doing is just different. Like, I don't think it's an entitlement issue. I think it's just a mindset issue. And, I really hesitate to put it into terms that say that people have this mentality that they just deserve whatever it is that they, that makes a great job. But at the same time, we're looking at work for a different kind of fulfillment than I think our parents did. So I think it is a little bit more of a generational thing.
There's this really interesting book. Peter Drucker wrote it, I think in the 80s or 90s, but he's talking to managers that came up in the 50s and 60s. And he coined the term knowledge worker. And he was trying to describe what we're talking about, which he wasn't trying, but he was explaining that it's different. If most of the value is between our ears, we have to find ways to allow that to work differently. And I think it's still hard, though. I've heard resentment from salespeople. I've heard resentment from executives and non-technical managers that they don't like the amount of autonomy and deference given to some of the knowledge workers in the business.
I can see that. I mean, I worked at a company, I talked about Mosey. I ran support. And yeah, the developers were king over there.
That seems to be a commonplace, but also it seems like the size of the company plays a factor in that. The smaller the company tends to do a lot more. A smaller company tends to be very different than larger companies. David, do you have any insight on that?
I think it more comes down to the upper leadership. So if the upper leadership, if they come from a sales background, I think you will naturally see that flow through, that the salespeople are treated more like the
Interesting.
gods of the company. Whereas if you have a CEO or someone high up that is a developer, or they have just been in love with technology and maybe does programming on the side just for fun, then you can see the developers or the R&D department take a higher pedestal in the company.
That squares with my experience.
And it might be also, I'm looking at how what we think we can get from technology, right? We're expecting to win all the marbles with our tech, and it's almost religious or ideological how we're going to go all in, and maybe it needs to balance sometimes back and forth, but we get a lot of autonomy for these magical people that are going to come and make all the money flow into the company. And since that's not always realistic, that might also cause some of the problems we have in companies where we just have to get real too.
So what's the difference that you guys find being an older developer in today's world versus some of the younger developers, that the experience between the two and expectations of the two?
Well, what do you define as young and old?
Well,
I think we're old.
All right, so I went to the GitHub Universe conference, and we went out to. I got invited to this group one night. We went out to this bar and hung out, and there was it was an iOS developer group. It's basically the San Francisco version of meetups here in Utah, and we were sitting around, and I'm talking to these guys, meeting them, and one of the guys on the end looks very, very young, and I said, how old are you? He said, well, I was born in '95. I'm like, oh my gosh, I graduated high school in '95.
Oh, wow.
So I would consider him a developer, right? Yes.
So did you wear like a Mr. Rogers sweater to that, or?
It was so sad. It made me so old. I'm asking a lot of leading questions here for David because these are conversations we had before, and you've offered so much insight. So I kind of want to pin up those questions here as well.
Well, I get teased too for my dad jokes at the office. And I'm always catching myself talking about, back in my day, it's pretty silly sometimes when I think about it. But, one difference I do see with older developers is we have enough experience that we tend to be pretty confident when we go to solve a problem, but that can be like problematic too, right? Because we're just going to solve the next problem like we did the last one. And so some of that creativity or the sweat that we would have to finish something, like I found that I don't do that as much. Like I don't really sweat the small stuff. I just, it's one of these, it's one of these, it's one of these. Let's put that together. And I'm pretty confident, but it's not necessarily my best work all the time. So that's at least one difference, I think.
I last night I had a guy over who I was going to intern. Great guy. I was going to intern him for Code Sponsor. We went through some projects together and some ideas, and I realized that he's really, really green, really, really fresh. And as I'm explaining things to him, I said, well, you got to look at every failure as a page in a book, right? Like all of us, we're all older. I mean, I think we're all old. I think, Dave, you're the only one that looks young, but I think you're still somewhat old.
That's changing quickly with my kids, man. They're sucking the life out of me.
So as we go through, we take these, we basically take all of our failures as a badge, and we put them in this book, and this book gets bigger and bigger, and eventually looks like a Webster's dictionary, right? But that book, I'm so proud of that book because those failures, those pages of failures that we have are exactly why the senior developers, or I shouldn't say senior, senior as an age developer, senior developers meaning they've been around a while and they've failed a ton, right? They've failed a ton. Those developers are going to approach problems a little bit differently. But it's always a question of like, how do you, the question is, where's the value difference to businesses, right? It all comes back to the dollar. Mm-hmm. Where's the value for a business to say, I can pay for 2 or 3 juniors or mids for the price of one senior guy? And where's that value difference?
I've been in conversations with people where they've asked ask that of us and justify your salary, and for the same reason. And the best I could do is like, well, I've been in the hole before. I know how to get out of it. These other guys, we'll train them up. We'll get them there for you. But for now, let's use us. Let's use people that have already been in the hole once or 10 times.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I mean, I've talked to some companies where, we start talking about what they need, and I mean, 99.9% of the stuff they need is basically form input and displaying data. And so it's, you probably don't need a senior guy, right? You can probably get by with a mid-level guy. And then, as long as you have a senior guy get involved periodically to fix, some of the things that the mid-level guy just isn't going to see, he's not going to get you so deep into the hole that you can't get back out. And then I've seen other companies that they don't want to hire that senior guy, and so they go with the junior or mid-level guy, and it turns out that they've got some pretty gnarly problems they're trying to solve. And so what they wind up with is they wind up with a mid-level guy who's drowning because he doesn't know how to solve those issues. And so he solves it wrong the first 2 or 3 times he does it, and he learns every time, and that's a positive thing, but it's costing the company time and money for him to figure this stuff out, or her to figure this stuff out, because ultimately it's a tricky problem. And you probably have a senior person out there with the right kind of experience that's going to go, that's painful, that's painful, that's painful, and that's the right way to do it. And then they can just solve the problem. And so I think it really boils down to what the company needs. It's not a cut and dried, oh, yeah, definitely this guy and not that guy.
How do you find developers? Like, how do you, because you don't want to not bring in anybody but seniors, right? So you want to have a full array of developers and skill levels. But how do you find the right?
Can you say that again for some of the companies that call me up and ask me how to find seniors?
Right. Well, let's talk about it. What are some things that you guys have done now? Now, of course, the whiteboard issue is what doing whiteboard interviews is like the worst possible thing that you can do to somebody.
Well, I think the take-home code tests are pretty bad too. Those rank up there as pretty lame.
That depends. I have mixed feelings about that. The whiteboard, if I put you on a whiteboard, it's because I don't like you and you're not going to get hired. I'm trying to scare you away because I think that's brutal. I think it's unfair, and nobody actually codes in a black box like that. But like the take-home thing, a lot of times what that is I've given you a big problem and I want to see how you deal with something that you probably can't finish with a reasonable amount of effort in the time I've given you, right? I'm trying to find out what kind of metal you have much more than what kind of coding chops you have, and I've seen people, they basically go home and after a couple of days, they come back with a finished product and they haven't slept for a week. And if that's what I'm looking for, then then
they're
fine.
Doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Because, more than one person has applied for the job. You can find other people's GitHub repo and then just copy their work, improve it, and submit it. And then you get the job. That's how it works, right? Or is that not how you're supposed to do it?
Points for ingenuity for doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's usually much more about, how much work is it going to be to bring you up to the speed I need you at? And am I going to hate myself for spending that much time with you? In other words, are you the kind of person that I want to spend my afternoon with every day?
I've been turning on the other side of that equation. I've been turning that around lately. I've been getting, I've been rolling my eyes a lot about all these people that want to stick me in the cog they have. They want me to be a cog in their wheel. And it's like, what? That isn't going to work for me. I'm not going to just go take another job at this point in my career. So what I've been starting to answer back with is, look, I could probably do that job, but why don't I just come and teach your developers something? We'll go over lunch. We'll do a brown bag lunch. Let me teach you guys something. And you'll get to know who I am and how I think. And I'm going to get to know who you are and how you think. And we're going to have an authentic relationship. And maybe we'll talk about jobs and how to work together later. But let's start on the right foot. That's how I've started doing it. And it's been an interesting experience doing things that way instead of just, allowing people to interview me and give me tasks and try to prove me or disprove me.
Yeah, but if that's the dynamic that I need you to fill on my team, then that's exactly how I want to interview you. if that makes sense, right? If I need you to be the senior guy and to make some of those senior decisions and to help my juniors and mids level up, then definitely, come into a brown bag lunch, because that's way more valuable to me than you sitting down and actually writing code. I need your experience to make sure we're heading in the right direction on some of this other stuff, code related. But, for a lot of the other stuff, yeah, it's okay. Well, we need you to, raise the overall caliber of the team. And you're probably going to wind up doing a lot more of that through your relationships with the other programmers than with any code you actually write. As a developer, you love building things that are fun and that matter. Me too. Do you want to add authentication to yet another app? Do you want to stay updated with all the security issues and patch them? Why not leave it to the experts? Auth0 is the easiest and fastest way to implement real-world authentication and authorization architectures into your apps and APIs. Allow your users to log in with either regular username and password, social identity providers like Facebook and Twitter, or enterprise identity providers like Active Directory, Office 365, etc. Or without passwords, with an email login like Slack or phone login like WhatsApp. Getting started is very easy. Add authentication to your Ruby app or Rails app, Sinatra, and others in less than 10 minutes by writing only a few lines of code. No credit card required. Get the free plan or try the enterprise plan for 21 days at auth0.io/rubyrogues. That's the number 0 in Auth0. Auth0 is trusted by developers at Atlassian, Mozilla, Bluetooth, Optimizely, Financial Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Try it out at auth0.io/rubyrogues. Remember, that's the number 0 in Auth0, and get back time building core features.
Yeah. And I love that too, because it can be an authentic, you know what you want. I know what I can do. Is it a good fit? Mm-hmm. If I was a junior developer, I probably wouldn't want to come in and do a brown bag. I'd probably want to just give me something on the whiteboard. Hopefully I can get through it real quick. But I like that idea that there should be an authentic start, I get it. I get what you're really after.
Yeah, but the flip side to that is that if I'm a company and I know that I just need some wizard to come in and do some machine learning, blah, 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 that, it's just going to take a certain level of expertise in the problems that I have, then yeah, I'm going to treat you like I treat the juniors. I'm just going to grill you on that particular area of expertise instead of in programming in general.
That's probably pretty good too. And, specifically with machine learning and data science, I think that that would be a step up. It'd be wonderful to see more and more recruiters and hiring managers that know what they want, because I think
I'm sorry, but
they're copying each other's job postings. They don't know what they want yet.
You want to get down to the core of things. That's it. They don't know what they want. They have no idea. I mean, I have met a grand total of probably 2 hiring managers that ever had a clue what they wanted.
And it's probably like the least enjoyable part of managing, right? You got to go hire somebody. So we're going to delegate that to the poor schmuck that we can give that to. We don't want to do that if we can get away with it. Maybe we have to hire, interview our own hires, but it's definitely not a good connection between what they're asking for and what they need.
Well, the issue is, and I can tell you this because I've seen so many managers make this mistake, is that what they do is they're looking at the velocity and they're looking at the pile of work they have to get done, and they realize they're not getting it done fast enough. And so all they know is they need another pair of hands. And so what they do is they kind of put down the technologies that they're using and throw that on a job board, because this is the stuff that we need you to do. And when it comes right down to it, if they just took another half hour and really sat down and said, okay, what's missing in this dynamic? How can we raise the level of the entire team by making a strategic hire? They would do so much better for themselves. But then you get a whole bunch of people who come in and they're all qualified to do those technologies, and they don't actually know what they want, even though you have all these options that meet your qualification list.
And there's another disconnect between, we just don't have the velocity we need. We're just going to add people. Mm-hmm. And not really getting into the system of how are we building our software, and could we plug another person in? How long is it going to take us to get them trained up? Is this a reasonable way to go?
Yeah, Fred Brooks had a few things to say about that, didn't he?
Yep. And I've been on teams like that too, where they'll double the team size because they've got to hit this deadline. It's like, it's not going to work, and it doesn't. No. And everybody puts in heroic hours, and it doesn't create heroic results usually.
What's the solution there?
Grass. I mean,
we can all point fingers and everything, but let's talk solutions.
Well, I think honestly, truly, the solution is being able to prioritize and say, look, this stuff will work end to end. It's not going to be pretty, but it's pragmatic and it's delivered, and we're going to come back later with better and more. In other words, if I can get you end to end, give you working software that you can actually start to sell or use or give me feedback on, at least then I can get down to realistic chunks of code to deliver around that tension line, that delivered code.
Think about the implications that has on a developer as well in the morale, where you bring on a bunch of developers, all of a sudden you're spending the next month on-ramping them, getting them up to speed. Now we've got four hands in the same code, all this stuff, where if you could scale back and say, you know what, we're going to speed the process up, but we're going to speed the process up by selective exclusion, right? We're going to exclude all of the things that don't matter. Like, for example, UI might not be as important initially, and focus on the things that do matter, and then have a shorter delivery timeline. Man, the developers coming out there feeling like a champion. They're more loyal to the company. They're more loyal to the product they're building, and they're just flat out happier. Yep. And that's, I think, and I've seen that happen both ways. But I think you all know Nate Hopkins, and Nate this is like his thing. He is like, I will deliver, but I will negotiate it down to something that I can deliver within a reasonable amount of time and still have it be the highest possible quality I'm able to create. And that's where true developer happiness comes from. When I see him and when I've seen in my experience.
Yeah, I think you've got it right there. And then where we're talking about the hiring is, what do we eventually want to be able to deliver, right? What kind of a team do we want to have? And then you can start thinking about the hires in terms of that, instead of in terms of, I need to grind a whole bunch more stuff here in the next month or two, so I need another pair of hands. It's, let's get this down to what's reasonable, and then let's start talking about what kind of a team we want and who we're missing.
And that really gets the conversation tied to things people value. I mean, if the managers or the executives don't really fully understand everything, but they're getting closer to it, they can value it because they're hearing the stories, they're involved. It actually boosts morale as well. It creates trust that we're working on the same problem together.
And I think something else that's really important for the team is really the synergy between the team members. I was reading this article. It was by Jonathan Soloranzo Hamilton, and it was called "We Fired Our Top Talent, Best Decision We Ever Made."
I'm going to like it already.
He just published it. I'll post a link, and that's actually one of my picks for today. But the premise of the article is that there's this developer who's there, and he is not friendly to work with, even though he is their most top developer, their best talent in the company. No one could work with his code. It was too unreadable because maybe this guy was too much of a genius or whatever, but he wouldn't explain it or help anyone else out. So a lot of the issues just kept piling up on him, and he wouldn't work with anyone. So that's not a good way to structure your company. So typically when I'm interviewing people, I find people that not necessarily that I'm going to be BFFs with, but people that I like, people that I can see myself working with day in, day out, people who are humble, people who can humbly say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm really interested. Could you explain it to me? Stuff that where people will want to work with you and I will want to work with them. And even if they're not the talent level that I'm looking for, you can always get to that. But you can't get to a point where you like working with someone if you think that they're an a-hole right out of the box.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question related to that, though? Because a lot of us have the tendency to want to hire people that we like working with, right? But then a lot of times what winds up happening is I wind up hiring somebody that looks and sounds a lot like me, right? So I find somebody that thinks the way that I do, or likes to work on the same kinds of projects, or solves problems in the same way that I do. And what I really need is I need somebody to challenge the way that I think. And so how do you make sure that you're getting somebody that you can work with who's going to call you out on your garbage when you write garbage?
Okay, so I would never hire myself. I would hate working with myself.
We all think that, but we all have that bias, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when I look for someone to hire, I look for someone who is passionate about development. It's something they want to be there. It's not a job for them. It's not an occupation, but it's something that they love. And them getting paid for it, yeah, sure, that's important, but that's just a very nice perk. But I look for someone who has the ability to think outside of the box. I have interview questions that I've designed to test someone's way of thinking by engaging in conversation. And if they're able to kind of work through those, and not work through to get the right answer, but work through them so I can see how they think, then that's going to show me a lot more of their potential 5 years from now than how I feel about them today.
Mm-hmm.
Because capacity for growth is important.
Yeah.
If they're going to be the same person 5 years from now, then that's not a good hire because they're not growing and learning.
I like that a lot as well. I try to imagine how are they thinking and where are they going with this? Sometimes I'll work with people and they just want the job. They want to be right. And they have already stagnated before they got to me. Mm-hmm. And some of these people are junior developers. It's just like, oh yeah, they heard the dollar signs, the dollar signs were calling to them and they don't have a real passion for it. Right. And they just want to be counted. I paid my dues, so you should give me a job, instead of, no, I really would love it. I would love to put my name on a project like this. What else could we do? And being willing to be engaged and caring. To me means a lot, because then we're going to work out problems together. We're going to be creative. We're going to think about it differently.
Mm-hmm. So how do you measure that?
Not fairly. I know that. I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting, right? We're talking about a lot of these issues and we're talking about a lot of the things that we like or look for, but I mean, it's hard. It's hard to know exactly how this all comes together.
It is. And one thing I've noticed is I've worked with people that are older getting into tech, or a lot of women in tech. And I notice only after I've engaged in the conversations how fresh they're thinking, how much they add, how different it can be. And it's like, I don't even realize the value's missing until I've had that conversation. So, I mean, it's almost like we should play some sort of bingo or dartboard game to say, look, let me have a conversation with somebody that would have a completely different perspective for a while and see what we can do with that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I've definitely seen that too, from people from all walks of life. And the thing that's really tricky, I've found with hiring anyway, is that they come in and you essentially hold all the cards, right? Especially if they're new. And so they don't really want to challenge you. They don't really want to push the boundaries. And it's a little bit unfortunate, because that's exactly what I'm usually looking for, right? Is, tell me where I'm wrong, tell me where there's another solution I'm not seeing. And, they don't want to rock the boat because they want me to like them.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good fast track way for me not to like you. If you don't call me out when I'm serious.
No, I agree.
And maybe you can just be honest with them up front, like, hey, look, I don't know everything, and I want you to call me out on something. Mm-hmm. Like, I need you to call me out when I've messed something up, because I want to learn more. And part of the reason why you're on this team is so that we can sharpen each other's iron.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with somebody who he was very he knew what he wanted, and he had a very strong opinion. And he and I had gone the rounds. I could tell him exactly what I thought. I wasn't intimidated at all by this guy. And it turns out I was the only guy that could do that with him. and everybody else was intimidated. And so this person, it didn't work well. He needed more people that could just be themselves around him. And eventually, it was, people have talked, he's gone on and done, he went after he moved on and did other things. People said, yeah, I really didn't like so-and-so. And like, well, why? It's like, well, I always felt like I couldn't tell him what was going on. So why didn't you? He's like the most patient person in the world. But I think that dynamic has to exist. Whatever the reason it was missing that one time, you've got to have that. So everybody's voice can at least be heard.
So going back to the beginning of the conversation, then, if we can solve a lot of these things, if we can bring them back so that it's, hey, look, our work's fulfilling, we're working with people who challenge our thinking, but at the same time are people that we like spending time with, and, we're all learning and growing together. Does that change the dynamic so that people stay in jobs longer?
I think so. I don't know if that's fair to say that, but every time I talk to people leaving, it's usually about that kind of thing, that they don't like their manager. They don't feel like they're heard. So these things are important. I don't know if that's the catalyst where everything went wrong, but definitely if that's missing, that's a pretty good indication that they're going to leave pretty quickly. I also think there's maybe I'm a little bit unfair in going here, but there's maybe 3 motivations we have. We want power, pleasure, or meaning in life. And if we're not getting that from our job, some people actually really need the job title. I've worked with somebody, he was smart, but he wanted the job title more than anything, and I actually gave him mine. It's like, hey, you can have my job title. I want to work on the tech. You could be manager. And it was awesome. And he was so happy that he could have this and put it on his resume. I'm like, I don't care. I just want to see that we get this project done. And what can I do to take care of it? And so I don't know, understanding how people are motivated so that they stay involved is probably a pretty good thing to do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. If people don't have that sense of purpose or meaning, or if they don't feel valued, or if they don't feel trusted, or if they can't trust the other members on the team, they're going to leave. It's just a matter of time. So you have to have, just those core essence of what it means to be on a team. And if anything's missing, it's just a matter of time before the team falls apart, or members are replaced, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or, money does speak. If someone else comes and says, hey, we're going to quadruple your salary, here's a contract and whatever, I'm sorry, money talks too. But that aside, I think it's really the dynamic of the team and how that person feels they fit in.
That's really interesting too, because I've seen the stress of somebody after they got that offer of, I'm going to quadruple your income and it's going to be great. And they liked their team. And now they're in this stressful moment of they don't actually want to leave, but the only rational decision is to move on. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that's a really interesting dynamic, because when the team's going well, I've seen people leave good teams for the money because it was so incredibly better. And but that's a lot of stress trying to decide, okay, am I going to go now? And it's almost like, oh, I'm going to dream for a minute. Oh, what would life be like if I were over on this team? They've got more ping pong tables. Am I going to enjoy that more?
2 games at once, man.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, they got to go through this really stressful decision of, okay, I got to really uproot my life for a bit. And am I going to do that?
I see the money thing come in much more often, I think, with newer folks, where people hire them as a junior, they get a year or two's worth of experience, and all of a sudden they're worth way more on the market than what the company's paying them. So do you avoid that issue altogether by compensating them early, or do you match it when it comes up, or, and then it's like, well, if we match them every time they get a better offer, then they're just going to keep getting better offers. But is that necessarily a wrong way of thinking? I don't know.
I read recently, I think in the last month, maybe 2 months, DHH was writing about how they handle that over at Basecamp. And he was saying, yep, we just hire a company, they figure out what the salary should be. We base it on Chicago salaries. They can live anywhere they want to be. And I think they adjust it quarterly, maybe annually, but it's an automated thing. They just didn't have to worry about salary. They're going to get market price, and it was just very straightforward. So there was no reason to leave the job because salaries are going up. And if salaries went down, they didn't reduce salary. So if there was a downturn in the economy, they're not going to lose their salary.
So you don't have to go ask for a raise. You don't have to go play all the games of, hey, look how much more valuable I am or whatever.
Oh, and I hate those conversations. I remember going into them and like, my hands are sweating, and I end up, even if they give me what I asked for, I resent the boss. I do. Inside of me, I just resent that I had to go beg for money. It's like, hey, I've got a case. I think it's a real case, and I had to bring it up. Why didn't you bring it up? It was so embarrassing for me to have to ask for money. And yet it's fair. I'm just asking for somebody to be fair. And that happened a lot more in the beginning of my career, where I would go and say, wait a minute. But I think I would wait for 3, 4, 5 days and just stewing over, am I going to go talk? Do I dare talk to them about how much I should get paid?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And, I love transparency in companies. There's a company, GitLab. They are a version control company out there, and they are so transparent in so many things that they do. And one of the things is their compensation. They give you a little calculator and say, hey, fill this out. How do you fit in? And here's what your salary is going to be. There is no, well, what did you make at your previous employer crap? It's all transparent. So I really like that about them.
Yep. All right. Well, I have a hard stop because I'm putting on Ruby Dev Summit. So I'm going to push us over to picks. And we've got about 5 minutes, so we got to make it fast. Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Dave, do you have some picks for us? Dave Kimura.
Yeah, sure. So my first pick is the blog article, We Fired Our Top Talent, Best Decision We Ever Made, and we'll have a link to that. And my second one is a gem called SimpleCov, and it's a gem that just shows you your test coverage on the code that you have. And it's interactive, so it will actually allow you to see which lines of code are missing test coverage. So it's really helpful, especially if you're working on a legacy application that you need to go back and add tests to.
Nice. Eric, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, a couple of picks. One of them is one of the open source heroes out there. His name is Chad Witter. And he stepped down last week, and I just think he's a fantastic individual. He's dedicated 8 years of his life to sustaining open source. So I want to pick him and GrataPay. I think that he's done an amazing job. Also, GitHub. I was at the GitHub Universe conference last week. Went over and visited their office. Now, you want to talk about a place where you never want to quit? That's the place. It is. They've got secret rooms, and it's just the app. They have a mantra of no meetings, right? Mm-hmm. And they have one room which is like an Oval Office, and they call it the Situation Room because anytime there's a meeting, it better be a situation. And so anyway, I thought that was the people there were very gracious in giving us a tour. They gave us like the insider tour, and I thought it was wonderful. So I picked them as well.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in with a few picks. Now, I've been heads down coding. It's Eric's fault for the last about week and a half. And anyway, I've been having just a terrific time. It's kind of funny because, it started out as this stressful thing, and I've been having a total ball writing all this code. But anyway, so I'm going to just jump in with a few picks here. One of them, and I mean, these gems have been around for a while, but I've just been really happy with them. I just implemented stuff with Carrier Wave and Fog, and it was super, super easy. It was so nice. So, and Mini Magic. So I'm pretty happy with that. And a lot of the development I've been doing has been with the Bash on Ubuntu that comes in Windows 10. And so I'm going to pick that as well, just because it's been really, really handy. I've been using Visual Studio Code to write a lot of the code, and the extension has issues. We did an episode on it a while back, but it's kind of nice. So I'm going to pick that as well. And then I also found an article on how to deploy with Puma and Nginx, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. David, do you have some picks for us?
I do. I've got two. The first one is Holding the Powerful Accountable. It's about these little data projects that people did to figure out what's going on. It's getting back to the root of what people are passionate about. And the other one is Machine Learning Mastery. I think Jason Brownlee is doing this amazing job of making regular developers, effective by just these little tiny snippets of information. You can learn a huge amount if you take it on a little bit at a time. So he's doing a great job teaching over there.
Awesome.
Nice.
If people want to follow you on GitHub or Twitter, or if you have a blog or anywhere else where you post your amazing, brilliant thoughts, as Eric would put them, where do people go?
Get Data Chops is the best place for me right now. Everything else is from there. So Get Data Chops is where I try to teach people things.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will catch you all next week.
All right. Talk to y'all later.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.